Hi everyone, this is Divinely Empowered with Antonia. Today we have a Lena, who is a psychedelic integration coach, healer, EFT coach, but yeah, she does lots of interesting things with psilocybin and other magical tools. So hi Lena, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Yes, I think everyone's interested in all sorts of different tools, which is what my channel is really about, is different healing modalities, because everything, it sort of does different things and helps in different ways. And some things that, it just gives you a broad perspective of what healing modalities are out there and what might suit various different people who are watching at home. So, okay, tell us all about it. So, psychedelic integration. So how does it all work and what do you do?
Okay, so there are different ways that people can work with me. So my main, I'd say my signature package would be preparing people to have a psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms journey, and then integrating it afterwards. So when we talk about integration, people generally think of that as the aftercare. What do I do now after you've had this big experience? When I say integration, I mean the before and the after. So preparation is part one. So when people come to me for preparation, it can range between a year and 4 sessions. That's the range of what some people need. Because if someone's coming with heavy trauma and they're very activated in their nervous system, we make sure to get to a point where they feel okay to have these big peak experiences, because whatever feels overwhelming here is going to feel 1,000 times more overwhelming there. So it's all about harm reduction and safety and working through as much as we can before you actually go into the journey. The beginning of a psychedelic journey can be a bit challenging sometimes, and there can be a lot of layers to get through. So the preparation phase is just about unpacking, so that when you go in, you're as empty as you can be, you're as regulated as you can be, and you're just equipped with all of these tools and skills to actually navigate that space. So then we go into the actual journey itself, which is generally between 5 to 7 hours using a high dose of psilocybin. I do a therapeutic journey, so it's blindfolded. I create a personalized playlist for every client I have. I feel into it and ask a lot of questions about what resonates with you. That's really important. There's also live sound with some of the journeys, depending on how we do it. And yeah, anything can come up, absolutely anything. We can talk about that a bit later. Then the aftercare is called, the post-journey integration phase. So what the hell do we do with this? You've had all these possibly memories, energies. You're basically coming out with a suitcase of stuff and saying, help me, what do I do with this? So together we just connect the dots, we unpack it, we look back on your intention, and that kind of becomes a rolling process for life, because these are tools that people tend to integrate into their lives and go back to again and again. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's it.
In a nutshell. So psilocybin is illegal in the UK. So how do you get around that, or how does that all work?
So all of the journey work is conducted in the Netherlands. I have a beautiful space, which is 25 minutes outside of Amsterdam. And so you can easily go and purchase truffles in any head shop, and then you bring them with you to the session. So it's very, very simple. You can hop on the train, you can hop on a flight, and all of the prep and integration can be done online or face-to-face. I have some in-person space as well. So yes, all above board.
No, I know there are laws and things in the UK. Yeah, I mean, and interestingly, I do wonder about the laws, because I don't know, if people did the internal work, they might be a bit kinder to one another. So you wonder why some of these laws are put in place, where things like very harsh drugs like sugar and coffee, which are huge stimulants, are very allowed, and a lot of the medications are very allowed, whereas things which are introspective tend not to be.
And can we talk about alcohol and cigarettes for a minute? Because, I'm not saying that psilocybin's, there's no risk involved, because there are risks with everything. There's risks with drinking too much water. There's risk with drinking too much coffee. However, if we're allowed access to alcohol and cigarettes, I find it absurd that we don't have access to a mushroom that grows from the ground, and it's native to this country, and it's been used for thousands of years. It's absolutely ludicrous. And if everything that went wrong with alcohol was sensationalized like it is with psychedelics, I mean, every newspaper would be full of it every single day, because it's the most destructive drug in our society. So my take on it is, we should be allowed access. We're grown-ups. We should be allowed access to our own consciousness with a plant that is natural. I just find it crazy. But I think that's probably a whole other podcast if we start to get into that.
Well, I just think that it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about yourself. And I mean, I'm assuming, I know in ayahuasca, they people are taking little doses every day. I suppose we're doing that nowadays with microdosing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research into microdosing in Silicon Valley and places like that, which they're very, very pro at. All the big execs behind Google and all these big corporations, I think Facebook and Google and some of the other ones in Silicon Valley, are all quite cutting edge, and many of them are taking things like microdosing of magic mushrooms, which is now found in studies to really, really boost people's happiness, help with their depression, and really make them a lot more content within their lives.
Yeah, microdosing is an interesting one because I think the press is painting it as this kind of happy pill, a bit like an antidepressant. Yeah. And even the studies are working on comparing it to antidepressants. The psilocybin studies, they compare it to an antidepressant. The problem I see there is, I always say, antidepressants make you feel better, psychedelics make you feel. So microdosing is going to make you feel whatever is there. And that might not be pleasant. That might be churning up some stuff you don't really want to deal with. So when you go into any, communing with any plant, whether it's ayahuasca, mushrooms, whatever, you kind of need to do it intentionally. And you're engaging with, I call them technology. Some people call them spirits. Whatever your thing is, doesn't matter. But they are for sure intelligent. They will kind of scan you. They will know where to go. They'll know what to bring up. So I do microdosing coaching. And some of my clients find, it's kind of like, not like a Band-Aid, but it does make them feel better. It enhances their well-being. It can make the depression, I guess it turns the volume down a bit. With other people, they can say, oh my God, this is horrendous. I feel awful. I'm crying all the time. And I say, good, let's work with that. But microdosing works synergistically with other practices. So we need to bring in some other stuff with that. It's not just going to do the job for you. You need to engage with it and work with it. And I think a lot of the Silicon Valley people are using LSD, and they're using it in a more of a kind of a biohacking way.
It's a lot of it's for the flow state, so you get new ideas. Like that's a part of it. That's and that's one of the interesting things about these states, because I think it gets you into flow state, which means you're more aligned with source, which means ideas come from source more readily into consciousness, I think. So you can be a genius, I guess, when you're more in flow.
It can put you in flow, not for everybody. It's intentional. So I guess if your intention is to use it that way, that's what you might get. Not everybody does. So it doesn't work the same way for everyone, is what I'll say about microdosing. The way the press talks about psychedelics, in my opinion, is very unrealistic. The things that trickle down are very unrealistic. When you're actually kind of doing the work, you see a different side to things. So yeah, we can get into that, but there's more to it, for sure.
Okay, well, tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's what I would say is we're seeing a lot of sensationalism. We're seeing a lot of, it's like 20 years of therapy in one night. We're seeing these documentaries that don't mention integration. They don't mention a lot of the work that actually has to go around the psychedelic journeys themselves in order to make these big shifts and these big changes that we're hearing about. And I think the people who have the more challenging experiences, we don't necessarily hear about those unless they're really bad. They're really on the other end of the spectrum. So there's a lot of gray area here. There's a lot of gray area. And the reason I focus so heavily on preparation is because most of that can be mitigated just by doing the correct preparation and by going in with the right intention, the right setting, in the right space. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with retreats. So choosing the right place, choosing a safe space, making sure you're not going into a massive group ceremony if you actually need a one-to-one and you've got serious trauma, things like that. And just knowing how to navigate the psychedelic space, knowing how to use your breath, knowing how to somatically release energy so that you can just go much deeper and you can get much more from those journeys. And they can be challenging and scary. That's not a bad thing. It's knowing how to ride those waves when they come, because we're very programmed to run away from discomfort in our society. We don't really have rites of passage anymore. We don't really have a lot of that real difficulty that people have had in the past. Our struggles are very different. They're more emotional. They're more, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to real, like in your face challenges, we tend to run or numb. And so just learning how to increase your capacity to be with discomfort, for me, is the number one tool that you can cultivate before going into one of these journeys. So that when it comes, you can kind of go, oh, I know how to do this. So just stay with it. You just stay with it. You stay with it. And then it goes. But if you run from it, that's where things get tricky.
It's the same in life, like you need to
Exactly
get being uncomfortable. And I agree with you that I think that we've decided that we must avoid pain at all costs. And I think that that's, there are things like the hero's journey It is about you suffering and triumphing.
Yeah.
And confidence really comes from triumphing over adversity, because it comes from within. Ego is coming from without. That's fake. That's just you not being truthful about it. It's you elevating yourself above other people. When you've actually been through the trenches and really come out the other side triumphant against all odds, then you have this confidence and knowingness, and you still want to collaborate with people. You still want to play with other people and learn from other people. Whereas ego is, it's all about me. Whereas confidence is coming from a different place. You want to learn, you want to grow. But that really, really does, true confidence, it doesn't come from a bottle, it comes from adversity. And triumphing over adversity. So any situations which are tough, taking up a new sport, anything, martial arts are fantastic for this sort of stuff, but anything which is uncomfortable, without being damaging to you, anything which is a healthy level of uncomfortable, where you're learning a sport or learning an instrument or a new anything, is uncomfortable. And it's not, and it's especially when you get to, over your 20s, then you start thinking, golly, I don't want, I'm going to be rubbish at this. And it's uncomfortable being rubbish when you're good at things, but the less things you try, the smaller your world becomes. It should be expanding as we age, not getting smaller. Yeah.
Completely. It's often called the psychedelics like a training ground for life. So everything's the same, as you said, it's about facing adversity, stretching your comfort zone, but it's so intense. It's so unbelievably intense that when you come out, it gives you this new perspective on life of like, I can do this. I just survived that. Like, I don't think there's anything more frightening than your own subconscious. And so you might see a monster in the psychedelic realm, and that monster has been created by you. So it knows all the things you're afraid of. It knows your worst fears, and you can be faced with that. And there's nothing more scary than your own fear. So once you learn to kind of look that monster in the face and just say, okay, hello, I'm just going to stay with you. And then eventually it's like a balloon. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will pop. If you can stay with it and you can face it, and you can kind of have that beginner's mindset that you're talking about. It's about, being humbled. You get really humbled in these ceremonies sometimes, massively. And you just think, oh God, I thought I knew everything. I know absolutely nothing. And sometimes you walk out with a bit of an inflated ego as well, thinking, I'm healed, I'm good, I'm done. I don't need to do any more work now. And then, you get hit in the face with life. So it's all of these ups and downs that I really like about it.
Yeah. So what are some of the best experiences that some of you or some of your clients have had?
So my experiences are interesting. My background is I had very severe depression for most of my life. And I got to the point where I wanted to end my life. And I just sort of said, okay, I'm going to try this thing, which was ayahuasca. If this doesn't work, I'm done. And I had planned everything. I knew what I was going to do. So I went to the dodgiest ayahuasca ceremony you can imagine in Lithuania, of all places. And it was just horrendous. I mean, it was awful. I got thrown into possibly the worst experience that could have happened. And I became really destabilized from those journeys. And I fell into a massive spiritual emergency. All kinds of things happened. So it's really bad, really, really awful, my first experience. But in amongst all of that, I experienced something called ego death, which I get asked about a lot. And I think it's a bit misunderstood. So essentially yourself can kind of go offline, dissolve or disintegrate in a psychedelic experience. It's not that common, but it does happen, particularly with ayahuasca. And I was sort of gifted this on my second journey, and I had no idea what was happening. I felt like I was physically dying. I couldn't breathe. My breath kind of stopped until I was convulsing. And then I felt like I died, and I drifted off and went to this kind of white space where I met this other form of consciousness. We had a little chat, and kind of when I came back to my body, I felt like I'd been reborn, and I was looking at my hands going, oh my God, what are these? Like I felt like an alien who'd been put in a human body for the first time. And I was just amazed by all of it. It was like all the trauma was gone, all the depression was gone. Everything just felt incredible. I was 100% in my body, and people were looking at me going, what's happened to you? You're a different person. And I honestly felt like Jesus Christ walking out of that ceremony. And bad news is it didn't last. So that was one of those, I'm healed, I'm done. That's all it took. I was kicked straight back to the bottom of that mountain, where I had to crawl on my hands and knees back up again. That was 7 years ago, and I'm still integrating that experience. So the best and the worst, because it was amazing and incredible. At the same time, the fall was much, much longer when I did fall down after that. But it did give me this renewed faith and hope that there's something else going on here. There's something else going on in this dimension that we're not quite sure of. And it sparked my curiosity. That's when I started working with mushrooms. And that was a much gentler way and a much better way for me. And I mean, I can't think of any specific journeys. Mine are quite difficult, actually. They're generally quite dark and quite tricky, but that's not a bad thing. That tends to be where the big healing happens, is in that basement of human emotion. So I'm very comfortable there. So I do tend to do a lot of somatic releasing in my sessions as well. I do a lot of shaking. I once had really horrendous hip pain. I suffer from hypermobility, so I have a lot of body pain, and I had such bad hip pain that I couldn't really walk up the stairs. I was kind of like dragging myself up the stairs. I did a psilocybin journey and started shaking. I do something called TRE. So I was shaking all the way through this journey, probably 5 hours of tremoring. And then the next day the pain was gone. And so I teach people these embodiment practices so you can get to a deeper level. You can work with the body and you can actually release that stored energy, because I do believe it's all energy. And that was just energy that was leaving my body, that had been stored up in my psoas muscle and here and there and everywhere. And once it had unwound, it was gone. Didn't need it anymore.
Well, I mean, what's really interesting about humans versus animals is when an animal has a big trauma, say, for example, a zebra gets chased by a lion. If they manage to get away, what they do is they go stand by the watering hole and they shake. And that literally this nerve is shaking, and it gets rid of all that adrenaline, that tension, that stored energy. And humans don't. We do the opposite. We tend to have something like a sweet tea to stop us from shaking. Whereas the shaking is actually releasing that tension, and it's very anti the way that we think now. We're trying to avoid the pain. You really want to allow your body, I mean, if it is safe, unless you're hypothermia, if it's a safe environment and all the rest of it, to continue to do the shaking rather than having something sweet to stop the shaking. You want to get this, we need to go through the pain. I mean, there are so many examples of us not going through the pain. Like, we try to bring fevers down, and unless it's very, very high and dangerous, then we should go through the fever, because the pathogen, the virus, fungus, bacteria, parasite, burns out faster than we do. So by bringing our temperature down, we're actually prolonging our sickness. Whereas if we just allowed ourselves to be uncomfortable and to have that fever, then the pathogen burns out and we will be better very, very quickly.
I mean, we don't trust the body, do we? We've lost the trust. We think it's something that everything's pathologized now. One example that's similar to what you're talking about is panic attacks and anxiety. So I have a lot of clients with anxiety, and when it comes, the natural reaction is to try and push it away and to get rid of it. But it's that same cycle. If you allow the cycle to complete, and it doesn't feel nice, it feels really, really scary. Yeah, but again, if you work with
it's a dying of some type, isn't it?
You feel like you're dying. You feel like you're going to die. But once you learn how to allow that, I call it a volcano. So it feels like an eruption's happening. That's how much energy is within panic. But if you actually can learn to allow it to complete, it will. And there will be some kind of catharsis. With me, it's usually crying or, again, shaking. But we don't have these natural mechanisms anymore because, like you said, we've suppressed them. And humans did used to shake, but we don't anymore. We do have a natural neurogenic tremor, which we don't use now, and it comes from the brainstem. And so if you learn something like TRE, and then you incorporate that into your life, you do it 2-3 times a week, you're emptying the bucket. So you're just tremoring and you're releasing all that stored up stuff, and you're not allowing it to fill up too much again. That's where we get things like anxiety, dysregulated nervous systems, when it just keeps building up and we don't have a pressure valve. We don't know how to release it. And we just don't have that anymore. We've lost it. We've lost all our animal instincts.
So tell us about TRE then.
So TRE stands for trauma release exercise or tension release exercise. It's something I'm training in at the moment, and it's absolutely amazing. It's kind of changed my life because what I was telling you earlier, physical pain, and also it's a bit like breath work. It's that way of shifting energy out of the body, but it's actually really, really gentle. So people can learn to do it by themselves, and then they can do it at home. It's a bit like a yoga practice. You don't necessarily need to go into the story or the narrative, which is what I really like about these modalities. I think one thing a lot of people do is live in the story, live in the mind. We talk until we're blue in the face about our stuff and nothing changes.
It doesn't release it. And actually, unfortunately, energy goes where intention flows. So unfortunately, if we really keep telling the story over and over again, sometimes we play Chinese whispers in our own heads, and sometimes sometimes they did a study, I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza was talking about it, and it said up to 50% of our memories are actually false memories that we have embellished and Chinese whispered ourselves and made something which was bad into something that was terrible by reliving it. It's not, it's very rarely releasing it. We need to release it. We need to let it go. We need to move on in a safe way, making sure we're not we're not staying in an abusive environment of any type. But if it was in the past, we need to just let it be and let it be gone. Otherwise, it just muddies our lives and it stops us from our joy and our potential.
Yeah, which is really easier said than done, because I've been that person who's like, I just want to leave it in the past, but I don't know how. Sure. It's like, I went to therapy for such a long time and it was like, you're telling me all this stuff, but you're not giving me the how. You're giving me, you need to, but how do I do this? And I was so frustrated. I wasn't getting any instructions. And so I went and figured them out myself. And so TRE is one of the things, along with breath work, where I've learned to tap into the wisdom of the body and just release through the body. And I'm amazed every single time at how little I have to go back into that narrative. And then I just notice over time, oh, I'm not kind of triggered by this anymore, or I'm not activated by this anymore. And it's very subtle, but it's happened. Actually, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's dramatic and something will disappear just like this. And I've worked with it through the body, kind of unconscious of what I'm even working with. So I incorporate these modalities into psychedelic journeying, which makes them a million times more powerful. And sometimes in psychedelics, you know, some people have very visual trips, some people don't. I don't. Generally, I'll have a memory or something that will go ping, and it's like, this is the thing that you need to release now. It's like an onion. You just get a new layer each time. So it's like, this is the thing. And I'll go, okay, thank you. And then I'll go into my TRE position and I will do the shake of my life. And then generally I'll stand up and my body will just fling me around the room and all this weird stuff happens. It looks like I'm having an exorcism. But then afterwards, the thing is clear. Whatever the thing was that pinged into my awareness is clear. And all I do, I have a mantra that's, I trust the wisdom of my body. And that's all I need to do. And my breath will do very strange things. And sometimes I'll hold my breath for a really long time. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter how weird it is. Because that kind of DSM, default mode network part of the brain has gone offline, it allows me to let my body take over. Otherwise, my mind would be getting in the way, saying, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? This is stupid. But it doesn't. It's kind of able to be quiet for a little while and just allow the body to do its work.
Well, I do think, I mean, people do shake a lot when they have orgasms. Maybe that's one mechanism which hasn't been completely shut down. Yeah,
true. Yeah. Pleasure is also healing. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, pleasure and pain. Well, I guess, you know, and I think, well, I have a saying, which I say in my level 1, I think it is, you can learn through pleasure or you can learn through pain. The choice is really yours. So it's really, are you avoiding it so it smacks you in the face? Or are you going for it? Like I say the lessons are coming through. It's a poker pinch, a slap, and then hit by a car. The lessons coming through. Regardless, this is a school. We are here to study. And as much as we wish to avoid it, it's coming.
Yeah.
And, you know, and if you can go and take the bull by the horns and work through your trauma with any modality that suits you, then go do it. Otherwise, it's going to keep on coming to you regardless. And you will get hit by a car, and the hit by a car could be some awful disease or a literal hit by a car. Or you could just go, okay, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to do it in a safe space. I'm going to go with whoever resonates for me and whatever modality works for me, and people can choose whatever one works for them, and go do the work.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It makes you a nicer person. It makes you a better, kinder soul. And you become, unfortunately, when we have a lot of trauma, we become very overwhelmed, very triggered, and our world shuts down. We become closed. When we deal with our stuff, everything expands and we become a lot kinder to everybody else as well as ourselves. And your life is better. You attract nicer, better things in every capacity, and you're not sitting there in fear or anguish or anxiety or whatever it might be, you know, but that's doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's, what I was going to say. Yeah, you notice when it's starting to work, like you were saying, you start attracting different things and different people, and you kind of think, oh, when you stop and you take stock, you think, oh, hang on, my friendships are no longer toxic. I'm no longer gossiping, or I'm no longer in these really abusive relationships. Whatever your thing is, I think that's kind of the barometer of something is shifting here. And you really have to take those pauses and take stock of your life, and because it's so subtle. And as humans, we're not really attuned to the positive change. We like to see the negative stuff. And what's next? What's next? We treat ourselves like this tick box of like, right, healed that. What's next? What's next? But it's really important to slow down and just say, okay, what has actually changed? Let me look at who I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. Because I don't think we evolve naturally. I think effort needs to go in. Like you're saying, work needs to go in. So you don't get, hit by a car or disease or whatever your thing is, whatever comes for you. It does take a lot of conscious work. And I do call it work. Some people don't like that. They say it's not work. It shouldn't be work. I'm like, it's work. If you've done it, it's work. It really is, but it's worth it.
And but the thing is, you can have fun doing it. You can do it in a way with a practitioner. Like, I think there's a pain pleasure element of work. Like I teach, and the work that I do is fun. It's deeply transformative. We dissolve traumas like that. We're doing crazy, like amazing stuff, which is I've modeled some of it on ayahuasca. I'll get into that in a sec. But it's great. It is work, but we make it fun. So then it doesn't feel like it's work. I think there's an element of work that it should be painful or suffering, but you can do the work, pleasure or pain. You choose it. Do you want to have the horrible side of it, or do you want to go and do it with psychedelics, with my stuff, with somebody else's work? No problem. And that's choosing, because it's coming for you. It's pleasure or pain. And if you go and adopt it soon enough, it can be fun, but it is work. There's no doubt. So I'll tell you about so I looked into psychedelics as quite a lot, and I looked into ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is an interesting plant. It's for people who are unfamiliar with it. It's a grandmother spirit who will show you various different things from your past, and you can have a different perspective on it. It's rather than you being in it, you can be out of it. There's similar as timeline therapy as well, and hypnotherapy. And you can see things from a bird's eye perspective or from a different perspective rather than being in it, and actually get more of a sense of what really happened as opposed to your perspective of it. Maybe something happened in childhood and you blame yourself because there was an argument behind your parents, but you get to sort of see it and feel it and release it from the perspective of maybe that wasn't actually that much to do with you, but you get to. It's a release mechanism. You can see it with many different modalities. You can certainly see it with psychotherapy, but there's often not a way to release it. It's just looking at things, as you mentioned. Whereas with plant medicine, there's often, you can see it, and then it's sort of just, once you've acknowledged it and seen it and felt it, it just sort of, it can vanish, it can go away. And that's what I do with my stuff. So we look at it and I dissolve the emotional attachment to it. So then we can do things very, very quickly, but with energy, without using a plant medicine in some way. So I did look into all these different modalities and hypnotherapy and all these different things to try and work out what the most efficient way of doing things was, because certainly like some things like psychotherapy are lacking the release mechanism largely. Some psychotherapists are bloody brilliant and they can do it, but it's not always built into it. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But we want something which consistently is focused on the release. Yeah,
you need to have that dissolving, as you said, or releasing, or however it is for you. Plant medicines are really interesting with this because sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't, and that's why we need integration.
Right.
And especially ayahuasca. I really want to mention this as a harm reduction point, because I have so many people come to me after ayahuasca kind of broken because they've seen something, particularly sexual abuse. And a lot of the time it's symbolic. Ayahuasca will show you things in a symbolic way. So people will think, well, this couldn't have happened because the timeline doesn't match, or this person was dead or whatever. So it's really obvious that it didn't happen, but it feels to them like it did because the experience was so profound. So we really need to look at it in terms of, is this collective? Is this ancestral? Is this symbolic? That's where the integration piece comes in. It's like, we don't take everything literally because it can do a lot of damage, particularly with ayahuasca. So she's tricky, that one. She is a bit tricky, and she doesn't really care how much of your trauma she's going to throw at you. She'll just throw it.
She's a little aggressive. She's a grandmother spirit with almost like a
cane,
wooden spoon.
This is what I say. I say she's got like a cane and she bashes you over the head and says, look. And okay, for some people it might be good. For me, it was not good. It was too much. And for a lot of people that come to me, it's way too much. And they're like crawling, going, help me. This has completely destabilized me. That's why I work with psilocybin, because it gives you.
The thing is, what we're missing as well is the people who in the Amazon who've been doing ayahuasca forever. they do it as a rite of passage when they're like 9 or 13 years old, and they do it quite regularly to do the work from going from, you know, which is why I think your stuff is so good, to have the integration both ends, to go from nowhere with a load of trauma into that real aggressive healing, hopefully, state. And especially if you're not doing, like, I think it's much better if people are doing it in the Amazon and they are doing it with these people, but, you know, some people aren't. And I think it needs multiple sessions, probably over multiple days, with people who know what they're doing. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, and it can re-traumatize you or make new traumas, like you're saying, and these false memories which are coming through, or memories related to something not you. And then you can end up coming out in a complete pickle, and that is not safe, which is why I think it's very clever and very good of you to do the integration both at both ends, for shizzle.
That's why I'm here, because it happened to me. That is my North Star. I'm always saying I vow to be the support I wish I had, because when I came out of that, like an absolute pickle, there was nobody to help me. I was like, what the hell was this? Even the indigenous, because like you said, this is part of their lineage. They grow up, they don't need integration. They are integration. They grow up with it. And us going from the West over there with no foundations, no framework for this stuff in our psyche and in our minds and in our bodies and nervous systems. And then people come back to London to their everyday jobs like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, of course, because you didn't lay any foundations for this. And I did the same thing. I'm speaking to myself. I just was so naive and so stupid, but I was also desperate. And I understand what desperation can do to people. But, you know, my message is like, gentle, work with psilocybin first. I mean, if you're really hearing the call for ayahuasca, go for it. It is for some people, but it's not for everyone, just like everything isn't for everyone. So for me, it's like, if you want to be really held gently, I'm gentle, but I'm firm. Like, I'm very hands off as well. I leave people to their misery when they're in their journey. I say, if you really need me, I'm here, but you can do this. You can get yourself through this. And they find the inner resources during those journeys to get themselves through.
So helpful, not to helicopter parent people too much.
No coddling, no coddling.
I know, but it's very, very important for our journeying. And I think that's one of the problems we've got in society today as well, is the coddling. You know, like, we need to learn our resilience, because then we're safe when these things happen. Standing there and making sure if anything does actually go wrong, then we are there to help 100%, but standing back and letting them do it. So there's safety with it, but making sure that they have their own journey and they learn how to be resilient and to, you know, get the most out of these situations, and so they can breeze through life.
That's how resilience is built, like you were saying about confidence. It's the same exact thing at the gym. And my job is, you know, space holder. The term's a bit woo-woo, but space holder literally means I'm holding the energy of the space. And there's a lot that goes into that. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot going on in the energetic field when I'm working with people. Sure. But I am not in your space, and I'm not trying to take away your pain, because you can learn from it. If you need me, I'm there. But with the psychedelic, you need to know that you're safe, that your physical vessel is safe, or you can't go deep. So in order to, if you're in your bedroom doing your, I mean, I've done some horrendous journeys on my own that I regret. I mean, I've done everything wrong. This is why I know what, I mean, you wouldn't believe the stupid things I've done. And I look back and think that was really dumb, but now I know why you shouldn't do that. I can say, yeah, you can take like 5 grams of mushrooms in your bedroom, but your body and your psyche are not going to feel safe to let go. And there's going to be all this resistance, and then there's going to be fear, and there's going to be nobody there for you. There's going to be no one holding the space. So you have to hold your own space while you're in the journey, and it's too much. So just having somebody there who takes you to the toilet if you need help, make sure you're having a bit of water, you know, is there for a chat afterwards. That's really what it is. It's just looking after somebody in a really loving, caring space, and very feminine way as well. Not in a coddling way.
Wow. Right, cool. Okay, so if anyone wants to enroll to do journeys with you, how does one get hold of you, my dear?
So my website is lennacoach.com, and from there you can find I have 2 courses. I have a course called Embodied that teaches you all of this embodied journeying stuff that we're talking about. That starts in September. I have a course called Equipped that also starts. That's something you can just buy as a product, and it teaches you everything you need to know about having a safe psychedelic experience. One-to-one coaching. I also do EFT as a standalone thing. Everything's on the website, and the best way is just to drop me a message through the website. Or my Instagram is Shift Happens, but I think it's _ Shift Happens _ because someone took the original Shift Happens. So lots of underscores.
It'll be down here.
Keep everyone updated on my Instagram, and that's probably the best place to find out. I also have meetup groups, kind of once or twice a month, integration circles, which are just donation based drop-in online spaces if you want to talk or ask questions. So yeah, and breathe. That's all my
and breathe. And any final words of wisdom?
final words of wisdom are just don't take your healing so seriously, and stop and smell the roses and have fun and enjoy the lightness of life, as well as, you know, the heavy healing stuff.
Okay, wonderful. Oops, hang on, I've just pressed a funny button. Oop, there we are. Goodness, I'm not very good with this new computer. Right, okay, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. You send the line, Lena. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry, Lena. I will have to pronounce it correctly. Bye,
Right.
everyone. Stop recording.